You're on.
We good? Good evening. Thank y'all so much for coming out today to our first inaugural State of the Community address hosted by the NAACP of Syracuse. We're so thrilled to have you here. Thank you to our board members and our officers, especially to Governor Cuomo's office, Senator Valesky's office, as well as the office of the New York State Comptroller, Tom DiNapoli. Today is about bringing the community together and prospering forward. I have the greatest pleasure to introduce our president, Linda Brown Robinson. Linda and her husband are pillars in this community and have been outstanding neighbors and friends to all of us. So with that, please welcome our president and friend, Mrs. Linda Brown Robinson.
Cassie didn't tell you who she was, but she's Cassandra, better known as Cassie Hammonds. And as you can tell from that accent, she does not necessarily was born and raised in Syracuse, New York. Right, Cassie?
Right, Kentucky.
Kentucky. I want to thank everybody for coming. We decided when I first took office, and I wasn't sure that it was something that I really wanted to do. I thought I could just kind of coast off into the sunset and just retire and do the other boards and commissions and things that I was on. But I guess I had a greater calling, and so thus I'm here. But there were a number of people that actually supported me in this endeavor, and they said, Linda, if you're president, then we're signing on to your team. And so I wanted to do things a little different because I kind of like to think out of the box. And so I said, what could I do that hasn't been done by this branch before? I said, well, we've never had an address, so this is our inaugural State of the Community address. So I thank you and welcome all of you, and you'll have to forgive me, I have a cold and have actually been sick for the last 5 or 6 days. There are a number of things that we're going to focus on as a branch over the next 10 months. And I'm going to read a list of what those things are. And they're not necessarily in any order, but probably just within a need. So we're only going to focus on just a tad bit tonight, just a few of those things. But over the course of the next 10 months, we're going to try to concentrate and address these issues that are in our community: segregation based on housing patterns, unemployment disparity, media disparity, homelessness and poverty, job creation, education, which includes the STEM program because that's the way of the world, skilled trades jobs and graduation rates, affordable housing, diversity in the police department and addressing community policing, assistance and funding sources for small minority businesses, whether they be female or male, or total community assistance for funding. The male and female teachers of color that are in the city school district. And we know we certainly need a lot more minority teachers, but I will say probably a lot more male teachers in the city school district. Quality of life issues, which includes drugs, snow removal, gun violence, and violence at large. Lead in our aging structures in the community, skilled trades jobs, linking public schools and local industries with some of our industries, and then mixed income housing. So you can see that we actually have an aggressive list of things, but I'm only going to address a few things. And the first one we're going to start off with is something that I thank my team and Corey Hudson identified. So According to, gee, I wonder how we got that distinction. We appreciate and 75, and today we had a big drop in temperature, so this snowiest and just wait a minute, the weather will change kind of statement. A lot of in our community, much part of that snow removal, very vulnerable population, that's one. And at every snow mound, I actually live storm that we have handicapped ride streets, we can have that. And because all death, too many. They do an awesome job, but I will tell you that where they shouldn't be parked, you even get through the street. So we have to address the issue of cars parked that he will, and we're actually going to be watching for all there has made to him, and we're going to see he announced in his inaugural addresses. When we can't fend for themselves and can't speak on NAACP, as I said, we certainly don't need one implementations in that. I think that list that maybe you didn't write. Snow removal. No, that was it? That was it, okay. So we can also move on to drugs, and our community have hindered the growth and the prosperity of our children. Just within the last third in her home, she can't even be safe in her own home with a program that is, and I think they do have a program that shouldn't be any surprise where shots are fired in this community. And I wish we had this are fired, but certainly we don't need to have every hour basis. Sometimes by that actually don't. And a lot of that is due to our drugs and other crimes that that don't help the good residents, the real good residents of this community. That we speak about this, and I just know that we, in interest of time, we won't, but I do know that the quality of life is something better, and I know go on where citizens can be free of fear. They can send their kids to school free of fear. They can walk the streets free of fear. And so if we at the end of and force people, the powers that be would probably, we're hoping the powers that be will help us attain that that vision that we have, that I can go to sleep at night, you can go to sleep at night, we all can go to sleep at night. So we're also going to be looking at community policing. Some don't want it, others want it. So recently the structure at Skiddy Park Police Substation was just riddled with bullets. Thankfully no one was injured, but the structure there is to promote public safety and provide police violence that culminated on the Father's Day riot back in 2016. Police, if we don't have enough police to do so. And I know it's been said, we don't need more police on the streets, those of us here at the NAACP. And we also felt that, I guess there's been lots of talk about cameras, I believe, body cameras that is, for police officers, whether they be male or female. They help both sides of the story. Police cameras, body cameras will tell the story. And somebody will see the entire story. And I know that the sound bites that you're going to get on the news don't necessarily give you the entire picture. But I do believe that once someone sees the entire picture, you'll know that that the body cameras do have a benefit to all concerned, whether they support the police or whether they support the victim. Now, we're going to move on from that, and we're going to go to poverty. Back in November of 2017, the Wall Street Journal reported that Syracuse was number 8 out of the 10 worst cities for Black Americans to live in. And I'm going to repeat that. Back in November 2017, it was reported that Syracuse, New York was number 8 out of 10 worst cities for Black Americans to live in. What a statistic to be proud of? No, I don't think so. and it was cited in the Post-Standard that created an index evaluating racial inequality for the United States. And through these factors, the income, education, home ownership, poverty, incarceration, and mortality, and despite positive changes since the Civil Rights Movement, a disparity still exists across racial lines. The list is as follows. The 10 worst cities for Black Americans, according to the 24/7 Wall Street Journal, is Erie, Pennsylvania, Peoria, Illinois, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Racine, Wisconsin, Niles, Benton Harbor, Michigan, must be a suburb of one of the larger cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Bloomington, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Trenton, New Jersey at number 7, Syracuse at number 8, Springfield, Illinois at number 9, and Bridgeport, Stamford, Norwalk, Connecticut at number 10. I don't think I really want to live in a city that has that kind of distinction, and I don't believe that you all do either. In their report, they cited the factors including to their findings residential segregation. Discriminatory and lending practices and housing policies have historically segregated Black and white residents along geographic lines. I don't think that's a surprise to any of us. Such residential segregation hurts educational communities and the outcome of African Americans. Most public school funding comes from and is tied to this. Property taxes, with less than 10% of the school budgets coming from federal sources. This means that schools in poor Black neighborhoods tend to be drastically underfunded despite outcome of the Board versus Education Supreme Court case banning segregation in schools, in public schools, that's funded by you and me, more than 50 years ago. Many of the school systems still remain divided along racial lines. Disparity in arrest and incarceration between Black, white in the United States. In disparity in arrest and Americans are incarcerated in state prisons, an increase of nearly 200% since 1960. Meanwhile, the incarceration rate is 275 per every 1,000 white Americans. And I'm going to read it again. Today, 1,408 in every 100,000 Black Americans are incarcerated in the state prisons, and an increase of nearly 200%. That's a lot of percentage since 1960. Meanwhile, the white incarceration rate is 275, one per 100,000 white Americans. In June of 2018, the New York State Comptroller issued a report on homelessness. According to that report, they visited to almost 400 locations outside of the New York City area. So that means they visited, according to the New York State Comptroller, and these were locations not within New York City, but outside the New York City area. And the impact of homelessness on children is particularly devastating. And the research has shown that among young children, the stress of homelessness can lead to changes in brain architecture. That means how they're wired and how they live are connected, which can interfere with learning, emotional and self-regulation, cognitive skills, similar to probably what lead does to you in living in a home. Social relationships, they can't be social if they can't eat and they can't sleep and they can't get a good education. In 2014, the report from the National Center on Family Homelessness ranked New York State 38th with the first being the best, and the overall performance across 4 domains. And that means that probably our children are not very well socialized if they're going to live in homelessness situations. And so a child is at risk. A child is at risk with, let me read that again. Maybe I should put my glasses on, huh? So as I said, we're 38th in the New York State register, with the first being the best in overall performance across 4 domains: extent of child homelessness, child well-being, risk for child homelessness, and state policy and planning efforts. So we want to get our children out of homelessness situations. It's just not good all the way around. And all that is tied to jobs, or the lack thereof jobs, and crime, because if a child doesn't have a good quality of life and they're going to live in a homelessness situation, then they're not going to be able to go to school, they're not going to learn, and they're never going to be productive citizens in the United States. Based on data submitted by the schools district in Onondaga County for 2014 and 2014-15 school year, there were at least 2,620 school-age children who were homeless in Onondaga County, an increase of about 639 from the year 2013 and the 2014 school. So we have actually increased our homelessness situation, and I don't think that is an awful way to be living for children. I know I wouldn't want to be homeless, and I know you all don't want to be homeless. And if we're going to be productive citizens in the city of Syracuse, the Onondaga County, then I think we need to find a way to eradicate homelessness. But perhaps now, nowhere is inequality clearer than in this disparity in poverty. In September of 2017, the Census Bureau reported that Syracuse's desperate poverty rate worsened. In September of 2017, the Census Bureau reported Syracuse's desperate poverty rate worsened in 2016, even while poverty rates improved in most parts of this country. Syracuse 2016 poverty rate was 13th worst in the United States of America. We make a good distinction on a lot of these lists, and they're not very good lists to be a part of. The income gap is also large, according to USA Today. The typical African American household earns just 61 cents for every dollar that the typical white U.S. household earns. In Syracuse, again, we're making a list, that number's even lower. African Americans in Central New York earn just 44.2% as much as the white income. And I'm going to repeat that again. The income gap is great in Syracuse, as with every other statistic we have. The typical African American household earns just 61 cents for every dollar that the typical white U.S. household earns. In Syracuse, as I said, it's even lower, and it's 44.2% as much as a white income. So I'll let you chew on that for a second, and we're going to move on to economic disparity and workforce development. Unemployment is one of the worst contributing factors for our city to be labeled a city of poverty. We lack the workforce to process the skills that the employers in this community need. Where there is a matched employer and a prospective employee, we find that there is a major transportation issues. Buses don't want to run on a certain day of the week. They stop running after certain hours. And that just doesn't meet our workforce population. And I don't know what we do about that, but everyone doesn't have the affordability to have a car. And so that means you rely on public transportation. And if buses don't run, then you don't go to work. If you don't go to work, you don't make any money. If you don't make any money, you can't feed your family. If you can't feed your family, and you can't pay your rent, and therein lies the homelessness that our kids will be facing. One of the means that where a worker can be trained to acquire the skills is by having the employer reimburse for the expenses via tax credits. There are programs that are available, but they require a strict monitoring process. And I guess we don't have all the answers, so I don't know who monitors that process. And with more help, we could probably, here at the NAACP, monitor that progress and that process. Lack of businesses growth is essentially one of the deterrents into business success is lack of business growth. So lack of business growth is essential to one of the deterrents to business success. Large companies still refuse to subcontract with minority women and women-owned businesses unless the woman-owned business is owned by a female family member. The trade unions, apprenticeship programs need to be reviewed and evaluated to ensure that there will be minority men and women on large jobs that take place in Syracuse and Onondaga County. And one example is when 81 finally does come down, we need to make sure that there is minority participation on all of these public projects. So I'd ask you actually to take a look at some of our public projects and just take a drive-by one day in the city of Syracuse and Onondaga County, and don't do that on a one-time drive-by basis, but take a look and go out into the community and see how many minorities are actually on some of these jobs. I think you probably won't be surprised that there are very few minorities, and maybe today if you call them on it, they might be a minority tomorrow. But that minority won't last long, and then we come back to the issue that sometimes there's just no transportation for that person to get to the job. So a lot of this just comes full circle, and it's a vicious cycle. You can't do one thing without the other. And according to the census data on Wall Street 24/7, back in November, I think that we talked about the fact that our poverty level is way below the poverty level, and the unemployment for Black Syracusans is 15% compared to the, as I said, the 4.4% whites. I don't know how we bridge that gap. With your help and with everyone's help, I certainly hope that we can begin to work on some of the things that this community faces. We don't have all the answers. I'm hoping you have at least 1 or 2 answers per person that can help us solve some of these problems. And we are going to try to address everything that we've addressed on this list that I read to you earlier. But I don't know what our plans are and how we force people to do this without looking like we're a racist organization, because we're certainly not. That NAACP, what that NAACP stands for, it stands for National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. That doesn't necessarily mean Black people. It means people of all colors. So when one thing affects one of us, it affects all of us. And if I don't have good quality of life and you don't have good quality of life, then we're all going to be affected. And I implore you, I ask you, we beg you to come with us, join with us in helping us to tackle some of these issues that face our community. I'm going to say one thing, and I'm actually very glad to see it. We actually have some media here today, and that doesn't typically happen. I like to say accentuate the positive and don't concentrate on the negative. And all too many times, that doesn't happen. So I stand here and applaud the media that are here today that will tell our story and tell our positive story and not tell our negative story. Because everything that goes on in this community is not about negativism. It is not. We have some stories to tell, and this is Black History Month, February. Make it about the other 11 months out of the year. Tell our positive story instead of every time someone gets shot on the south side, the east side, the west side, the north side. You don't have to report it. And I actually have a criticism about, you don't have to tell people what side of the time it is, because people who don't know, and the only thing that they know is when they read the newspaper, is, oh my God, on the south side something happened again. Let the people figure out where it is. Give them the name of the street and let them figure it out. You don't have to tell people where it is. They'll figure it out. So I thank you again for coming. We've got a lot more issues to address in this community. With your help, we will certainly overcome a lot of those. Thank you for coming to our very first inaugural address.
Before everybody leaves, hopefully a lot of y'all are some members of the NAACP. Raise your hand if you're a member. Great. So those of you that your hands are not raised, I see you, and I'm going to come find you with the envelope. And hopefully you will give me your information and your dues. And because we do not run on our good looks, so we would love that. And hopefully you're going to